Dear all, please can we take our seats? I appreciate it's been a long day, but it's important that we start as promptly as possible. Can I thank relevant stakeholders again for their presence? Please, can I very politely say if everybody can take their seats as soon as possible? Thank you so much. I'm just going to start with a summary of our discussions this morning. I think it's the governance section, I think, is something we heard from the opening statement from Zimbabwe on Monday morning about the importance of prioritising governance. And we've had some very important discussions this morning. We've talked about what should be the role of the COP, that oversight role of the COP. We've also talked about the role of the WHO Secretariat in terms of how it links with relevant international organisations and relevant stakeholders. Very valid for this discussion. And what is it? And what else should it do? In what way? And I think the particularly important issue of the advisory group, which we are going to come to in an informal after this discussion. So, how broad should the role of the advisory group be? Actually, what can its role be, for example, in implementation? We've also discussed in terms of who does that advisory group report into? How do we ensure normal things such as avoiding conflict of interest and all such points? So. The governance system is critical in terms of that implementation and in terms of we make sure we don't just have this agreement as this piece of paper, but it actually makes a difference in reality. So in terms of the thoughts of relevant stakeholders, it would be really good to get your thoughts about actually the role of the COP. What can be the role of the WHO Secretariat, and how can we ensure an advisory group that is fit for purpose and is really effective in terms of governance? So those were the main things, and I think that feedback will then be really helpful as we have the informal conversation very shortly. And I think just to stress, the on-screen text was shared from this morning with relevant stakeholders, but obviously that will just be the text from yesterday, not any further discussions we've had today. And then this afternoon, we continued on that governance section, but we've just spent the last hour and a half starting to talk about the operation of the PABS system, this issue of equal footing that is obviously very important, I know, for delegations, and just starting to look at all the different issues around access, around benefit sharing, how do they link, and then all the discussions we will have to come on to in the next couple of days on that. So given that covers quite a wide range of the content of this agreement, I think stakeholders have quite wide range to talk on these issues. But just a reminder, we do have that further conversation tomorrow lunchtime. Where we can just talk in a bit more length and a bit more detail on the specifics. So I'm going to open and Pida is reminding me we shared the 12 o'clock version covering this morning as well. So we've had, so you'll have that, all this morning's changes will be in there. And bit by bit, making progress as we need to do towards May. Ambassador Tovar is here with us. I've just given an update about this morning. I've given the 2 or 3 line summary of this afternoon's discussion, but before we open the floor, Ambassador Tovar, I will pass to you.
Thank you, Matt. Greetings to all of you. Now, I think it's important for you to understand that as we try to unpack the many elements of Article 12, obviously there is difficulty in finding like a clear language. Everybody agrees, for example, when we were discussing this afternoon Section 2, everybody agrees on the idea of an equal footing to treat the sharing of the information or access to information, but also the sharing of benefits. And how do you do that in terms of the various types and natures of participants? So at some point, we still haven't started that discussion. At some point, we will need to start assigning to the various categories of participants or potential participants or users ways of them to understand that we want them all to participate, but we want them to understand that the system needs some sort of accountability. And that can come into the form of signing the terms and conditions form, not even an agreement, or more precisely especially for developers and manufacturers, signing full contracts with WHO. So as we progress in the discussion of how the system is crafted in both access and benefit sharing. We will then come up with these various categories and the terms for these various categories to be considered participants or allowed to participate and have access and use the materials and the sequence information. But just to reassure you that this is beginning to gain some traction in terms of specificity, and I think we will then resort to informals first in order to see how best we can craft a language that allows a system that is very inviting, encouraging participation rather than discouraging them on one hand, but it's actually a very safe, transparent, and accountable system. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks so much, Ambassador Tovar. And I should also say the whole point of this week is we need to start making more progress as we move towards the May deadline. We have been set with just obviously 2 more full weeks of negotiations after this. And so actually what's been encouraging today is also the discussions we had yesterday on participating manufacturers, on PABS materials and sequence information. We haven't just stopped there. Delegations are talking, delegations are discussing how do we bring that convergence, how do we come together on those points. So, and so that's been encouraging to see, and we'll keep that positive spirit going as we move through the rest of this week. So I think with that, I will open the floor for anybody who would like to make a contribution, please, either in the room or online, because your contributions are always greatly valued. Knowledge Ecology International, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. With regards to conditions that may be placed on researchers seeking access to the PABS system, it may be useful for negotiators and others to have an information session on the provisions in other biomedical databases and data sharing consortiums that have placed restrictions on using the data to apply for patents. There are a number of well-known examples, some led by industry, some by the research community, and it would be good to review the purpose and impact of such agreements. KEI would be happy to provide the WHO Secretariat and Bureau with a list of examples, and I'm sure others would also have suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We always value the written statements and input of our relevant stakeholders, and I'm sure that would be very useful in a way that others may want to contribute as well. So thank you very much. Anybody else, please? This is where my eyesight is really tested. Third World Network, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. At the core of ABS is the fundamental link between access and benefit sharing, which we believe should be clearly reflected in the text. Access to materials and sequences should be subject to terms and conditions of use as well as benefit sharing. Setting out the terms and conditions for using the materials and sequences is just as important as establishing the benefit sharing arrangements. This aspect should be captured in standard contracts that should be established by IGWG, which apply to those accessing materials and sequence information. There is significant experience with the PIP framework and also in the research community that shows that such contracts provide legal certainty for both providers and users and can facilitate R&D. On benefit sharing, we would like to highlight a few critical points. First, annual monetary contributions should be received from those making financial gains. Second, regarding reservation for pandemic, we often hear reference to 20% commitment. However, let us recall that the text of the pandemic agreement states target is 20%, of which only 10% is a definite commitment. The remaining commitment remains uncertain. We call on IGWG to have a much more firm and certain commitment to 20% during a pandemic. Further, how do we prepare and prevent a pandemic? These are key objectives of the pandemic agreement. We know early intervention is essential because once a pandemic hits, the socioeconomic consequences are devastating. However, this requires timely access to affordable vaccines, therapeutics, and diagnostics during outbreaks and fakes as well. This has yet to be adequately addressed, and we hope that IGWG can do so when it discusses the various texts. Furthermore, a key challenge during COVID-19 was the highly concentrated supply chain in the pharmaceutical sector. There is considerable talk about the importance of diversifying production, but there needs to be political will to require the granting of licenses to more manufacturers to achieve that objective. Finally, it is essential for the IGWG to develop the operational elements of the PABS system at this stage rather than deferring this crucial work to the COP. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. A number of points we'll obviously be discussing over the rest of this week as we always take this work forward, always consistent with Article 12. And thank you for the important point about the links to the COP as well. Thank you. Anybody else, please? Leibniz Institute, please. DSMZ. Thank you.
Thank you, Co-Chair. Your German is improving day by day. I love it. I wanted to give a reflection from the scientific community on maximizing those products that should land into the PABS system, and a reflection on the consequences of controlled access versus a more decoupled approach. So if you take right now how protein structures, so those are the machines of the cell, they're probably the most important things in many types of drug development, how they work right now. Artificial intelligence has made huge breakthroughs. So what we can do right now is we can take 300 million DNA sequences, we can take a couple of million of protein sequences, we can take a couple 100,000 protein structures, we can smush them together in an AI machine, and then we can have brand new predictions of what a enzyme of choice can do. And that's an amazing thing that will accelerate and will have impacts on public health, and we want to capture those benefits. However, a conditional access system that requires that data stay in its silo and cannot play with the larger scientific ecosystem will be unable to capture those kinds of benefits. So any vaccine or diagnostic or therapeutic that results from those kinds of AI applications will not be captured in this system. That's why I think it's really important to make sure that the entire scientific ecosystem is accounted for to make sure that you get the benefits that you deserve.
Dankeschön. Die nächste Seite, wir können in Deutsch sprechen. Okay, anybody else, please? I tell you, German is easier than understanding DSI. Pandemic Action Network, please.
Thank you, Co-Chair. I have a question more for the Bureau and also for member states if they want to add anything. Tomorrow we have an extended session, and I think to make the most of it, it will also be very good, especially for those who cannot be here in Geneva. If you can point out to some of those areas of divergence, of course without naming who's behind it or anything, but I think if you can provide a bit more of direction of where input would be beneficial tomorrow, I think that could elevate the quality of tomorrow's extended session and make sure that there is input that is helpful for the topics that you have addressed so far. I think you have already mentioned some, but also the ones that you anticipate for the rest of the week. Thank you.
Thanks so much. I think that's a really helpful suggestion. We want to make sure the session is useful for you as well. So we'll take that forward with the Bureau colleagues and the Secretariat. Thank you. Is there anybody else, please? If not, we have the informal to turn to. And just before anybody else says this, I know it is very hot in this room. That's been the main message I've received all day. I have passed messages on, but I haven't yet found the aircon unit to turn on. But we appreciate you working in these conditions. So I think with that, we look forward to a further longer discussion with our relevant stakeholders tomorrow. We also appreciate that so many IGWG members have stayed in the room, and all these points are vital. We work together, we find a way forward, and many of you enjoy the informal, and those